Discover 5 incredible secrets to transform your life, overcome the hidden fear of asking for help. Jake was drowning. The weight of his family's garage, a crumbling relic of better days, sat heavy on his shoulders as he tightened yet another stubborn bolt, sweat clinging to his brow. He alone bore the burden of bills piling up like unfiled paperwork. A real man doesn't ask for help, his heart echoed as he hastily wiped grease from his hands, ignoring the anxious glances of his wife, Sarah. She wanted to reach out, to pull him out of his self-imposed isolation, but Jake's pride was a fortress, keeping her and their bright-eyed daughter, Lily, at bay. The annual harvest festival loomed like a bittersweet shadow on the horizon. Festooned banners and cheerful chatter filled the town square, a reminder of joy that Jake felt light years away from. As laughter echoed from family picnics, Jake found solace beneath the hood of a rusted pickup, drowning out the joy with the rasp of worn-out tools. Sarah cast wistful looks at him from where she set up their booth, trying to coax him back from the brink of despair. Then out of nowhere, Mark reappeared, a glimmer of what once was, now a flourishing entrepreneur with bright ideas. "Jake! You gotta hear this," he exclaimed, enthusiasm spilling over as he proposed a partnership that could reignite Jake's business. Yet, Jake could only grimace. The idea of accepting help felt like admitting defeat, and pride doused the flicker of hope Mark offered. With a half-hearted smile, he turned Mark away, leaving their friendship hanging like a forgotten ornament. Days blurred into nights, filled with silent dinner tables where Lily's laughter should ring. Sarah's frustration grew palpable. She yearned for Jake to see that they were a team. With every moment lost to his isolation, the chasm between them widened. An abandoned garage. Then, a storm came, fury and chaos, rain pouring down like the town's collective tears. The flood surged through, uprooting dreams and forcing neighbors to band together in unity. Amidst panic and heartache, Jake saw families standing side by side, grabbing supplies, lending hands, and mending what was broken. The sight hit him like a gust of cold wind. This was community, this was connection. It was in this moment that Jake found himself terrified not by the floodwaters, but by the realization that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was the very fabric of strength. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the townsfolk rallied, Jake felt a stirring in his chest, a nagging absence where he could have been. He dashed towards neighborhoods, ready to lend his hand. His heart raced with the energy of the community, the collective heartbeat of resilience. He fought through the memories of refusals, of pride, and sought out Mark. Desperation painted across his brow. The weight of his decisions crushed him. With a storm-tossed sigh, would Jake finally turn towards the light of connection? With hope rising from the floodwaters, he stood on the edge of a transformation, the answer lingering just out of reach, waiting for him to take the first step. Jake sprinted through the pouring rain, the torrent around him a stark reminder of how separate he felt from his own community. The vibrant voices of laughter and cheer that had once defined the harvest festival were muted, overshadowed by the pulsing heart of the storm. Each step forward fueled a flicker of determination. As he neared the neighborhood where he often found comfort in connection, he glimpsed Mark organizing a group of volunteers. Mark's eyes lit up as he caught sight of Jake, and without a moment's hesitation, he waved him over. "Jake! You're here. We need all hands on deck," Mark called, his voice slicing through the chaos around them. Despite the wild weather, there was a fire in his tone, an infectious urgency that momentarily pushed Jake's worries aside. "Mark," Jake hesitated, the weight of his pride creeping back in. But the sight of families rushing past with buckets, sandbags, and tools nudged something deep within him. This wasn't just about him. This was about the people he loved, the community that had always been their home. "Come on," Mark urged, closing the gap between them. "We can't do this alone. It's time to lend a hand, not just stand by. Feeling the warmth of belonging ignite deep inside, Jake nodded. He could see it in people's faces. Sleepless exhaustion mingled with resolve. The storm was relentless, but so was their spirit. They were there for one another. Together, they formed lines, passing buckets filled with water away from homes flooded in despair. Each quick exchange mirrored the camaraderie of friends long forgotten, laughter breaking through the raindrops as families united against the storm. Jake felt an electric pulse of connection with every hand that met his, every shared smile and unspoken affirmation. Over the course of the evening, side by side with Mark, Jake felt the barriers he had constructed around himself begin to crumble. When their hands were clasped over a heavy supply box, Jake took a deep breath and finally uttered the words he had been holding back for too long. "I'm sorry, Mark, for shutting you out." Mark paused, looking surprised, then gave Jake an understanding nod. "We all get lost sometimes, man. It happens. What's important is that you're here now." As their teamwork grew stronger, Jake discovered something unexpected. It felt like healing. Lily's sweet laughter echoed in his mind. She would be proud of him for trying, for stepping out from the shadows. But even as the storm raged on, Jake faced another hurdle. Whenever he found solace in their actions, a gnawing voice reminded him of his financial struggles, of the weight still bearing down heavy on his heart. Could he truly accept help when it was needed the most? Could he set aside his pride for the sake of his family? Underneath the relentless rain, the question loomed like an unresolved chord, echoing through the gathering clouds. As Jake looked up to see more neighbors joining the effort, he could almost taste the sweet potential of a fresh start. But would he be brave enough to embrace it? Just as his resolve began to crystallize, a flash of lightning lit up the sky, illuminating the gathering crowd. One thing was certain: it was much more than a storm that was raging. It was a turning point, and Jake felt the cusp of something vast about to unfold. The real question was whether he would step into it or hide away again. As the storm raged around them, Jake felt an unshakable pulse radiating from the group. This wasn't just an emergency response, it was a reunion of souls fighting against the tempest together. With every bucket they passed, he recognized familiar faces: neighbors who had always nodded a friendly hello or shared a brief chat at the market. Their eyes sparkled with the unity forged in a shared struggle. The rain may have driven them apart in recent years, but in this moment, they were bound together against a formidable foe. "Jake, to the left. We need help over here." Mark's shout pulled him from his reverie, and he responded without thinking, rushing to assist. A small child beside him, drenched from head to toe, looked up with wide eyes. "What's that noise?" she asked, pointing to the deafening roar of the wind. "Just nature being angry," he replied with a grin, momentarily lifting her spirits. He handed her a bucket, and in that instant, he realized how vital each person was to this effort. Not just adults, but kids too. They were reminded of the love that stitched this community together, a love that had weathered storms before and would undoubtedly do so again. But as the rain continued to pour, a new round of anxiety reared its head. Jake's hands trembled slightly as he filled another bucket. The image of his family floated in his mind: his daughter, his wife. Did they have enough? Would they ensure their home was safe? The repetitive cycle of doubt began to circle again. "Hey, you alright?" Mark's voice broke through the fog of worry that seemed to envelop Jake. "Yeah. Jake hesitated, the weight of reality threatening to crush him. "I'm trying to keep it together, but there's just so much." "Then let it out," Mark encouraged gently. "We're in this together, remember?" With that, a dam broke inside Jake. He shared his worries, the struggle to keep up with bills and responsibilities. He opened up about feeling lost, of fearing he would drag his family down with him. Each confession felt like shedding a heavy coat, allowing the warm air of solidarity to flow around him. By the time Jake fell silent, he noticed the quiet of Mark's understanding. "We'll help you. However we can. We're neighbors. Family." Jake swallowed hard, emotions welling in his throat. Family. That word had felt distant for so long, yet in this consumed state of urgency, it suddenly felt tangible. In the midst of pigeons squawking overhead and echoes of thunder around them, he felt the reality settle in. Maybe asking for help didn't equal weakness, perhaps it was a quiet strength, a willingness to lean on others. The work carried on, each hour flickering by like fireflies in the darkness. They passed not just buckets, but shared snippets of lives, fears, and hope, stories intertwined like the very branches of the trees that shielded them from more than just the rain. With every shared moment, every honest conversation, the clouds around Jake felt slightly less daunting. Yet underneath it all, the nagging worry simmered quietly. What would happen when the storm passed? Would this sense of belonging endure? Would he still feel brave when faced with the mountain of his financial woes again? As they took a collective break beneath the flickering streetlight, Jake's heart echoed with a burgeoning hope. His gaze swept across the gathered crowd, a mix of devotion and resilience embodied in every face. But just then, a shout sliced through the air, a voice a few blocks down, frantic and urgent. "Help! We need help over here." Jake felt the adrenaline spike, and without hesitation, he grabbed Mark's arm. "Let us go." With his heart pounding in sync with the storm, he plunged back into the night, knowing it would take more than physical strength to navigate what lay ahead. Would this call for help unleash another wave of bravery within him, or would he find himself retreating again? For the first time in years, Jake felt the answer on the tip of his tongue, ready to be discovered. As they sprinted toward the frantic voice, rain poured down like a relentless waterfall, drenching Jake and Mark to the bone. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating their path, and every crash of thunder echoed their pounding hearts. The urgency in the air was palpable, a shared sense of duty tightening their resolve. "Stay close!" Mark shouted over the roar, his eyes scanning the chaotic scene ahead. Jake nodded, barely able to keep up with the long strides of his friend. The shouts grew louder as they approached a house framed by trees twisted and thrashing in the wind. When they reached the source of the noise, they saw a woman in her front yard, frantically waving her arms. Her face, illuminated briefly by another flash of lightning, was a mask of fear. "Help! My husband! He's trapped inside." Without waiting for another word, Jake's instincts kicked in. He pushed aside thoughts of his own family, the worries about bills and looming responsibilities evaporating with each heartbeat. He hurried forward, pushing through the spray of water as he called out, "What happened?" "Tree fell on the house," she cried, desperation lacing her voice. "He was trying to get the kids to safety. I can't get in." In that moment, Jake felt a surge of determination. This was bigger than him, his worries, his pride. It was about doing what needed to be done. "Mark! We need to clear the entrance." He shouted. Together, they dashed toward the front door, where the frame had been partially crushed beneath heavy branches. The sound of muffled cries drifted from inside. Each cry ignited a fire of urgency within Jake. He turned to Mark. "We can't waste time." They worked feverishly, pushing through the branches, their hands slippery and raw from the rush of adrenaline. The storm raged on, but the world around them faded. It was just the two of them, the scattered debris, and that desperate plea for help. After what felt like an eternity, they finally cleared enough space to open the door. "Go!" Mark shouted, nudging Jake ahead. Without a second thought, Jake stepped through the threshold, heart racing. Inside, chaos met him in the form of toppled furniture and dim lights flickering. He called out, "Is anyone here?" "Daddy!" A small voice cried, somewhere deeper in the house. It was followed by high-pitched sobs. Jake's heart broke, but there was no time for hesitation. He dashed toward the sound, their cries guiding him through the disarray. "I'm coming. Just hold on." All his fears were replaced by a single thought, getting that family to safety. That he finally found them huddled in a corner, two children, wide-eyed and terrified, clinging to each other. Relief flooded him, and he knelt down to their level. "Hey, I'm here. We're going to get you out." At that moment, he felt invincible, just then, the sound of creaking wood filled the air, making every hair on his body stand on end. Another crack, and the ceiling began to shift. "We need to move, now," he urged, grabbing each child's hand and guiding them toward the door. Outside, Mark was waiting, urgency in his eyes. Together, they led the kids back into the rain, where their mother stood, hope igniting her features. As the four of them rushed to safety, Jake felt something shift within him, a realization of what it meant to truly connect, to be part of something bigger. Once at the edge of their property, they turned back to the house as another crash echoed behind them. Jake's heart sank with fear for the family, but relief soon washed over him as he saw the kids' faces light up, finally reunited with their mother. "Thank you," she cried, tears mingling with the rain. It was a simple phrase, but it resonated deeply with Jake. He realized how profound their interconnectedness could be. This wasn't just about saving someone, it was about lifting each other up. As they stepped into the unexpected calm of the porch, their breathing steadied. Jake couldn't ignore a deep-rooted admiration for the bonds they were forging in the storm. But in the back of his mind, a tremor of worry lingered. What if he was called on again? Would he muster that same courage? In that moment of reflection, he knew the answer was still submerged, waiting to rise alongside the storm's aftermath. But he also felt a spark of hope ignite. The courage was within him, waiting to be discovered. With a determined breath, Jake turned to Mark, ready for whatever challenge might come next. The storm was still raging, but together, they were forging their way through. "What's next?" he asked, ready to face whatever came. And in unison, they stepped back into the chaos, united in purpose and hope. The storm raged on, muted only by the adrenaline pumping through Jake's veins. They had just barely caught their breath when a distant crash split the air once more. Jake and Mark exchanged worried glances. The chaos around them wasn't over. "Did you hear that?" Mark shouted over the din. "Yeah. We can't just stand here," Jake replied, heart racing again as he looked back toward the house now heavy with debris. The rain might wash everything away, but it wouldn't erase the cries echoing in his mind. "I think someone else might still need help." Without waiting for Mark's response, Jake stepped off the porch and plunged back into the storm. The wind whipped at him, but it only fueled his resolve, the sense of urgency twisting tightly in his gut. "Jake, wait!" Mark called after him, but Jake didn't stop. He needed to act. They had already saved one family tonight, surely there was another chance waiting to be seized. The wind howled, making it hard to hear anything above the noise. He pushed his way through the thick brush, soaked to the skin but feeling a foreign spark of bravery. Trees fell around him, creating a barrier between him and whatever called out in the distance. He squinted into the shadows of their swaying forms, searching for signs of life. "Anyone there?" he shouted, the confidence in his voice wavering just a bit under the storm's weight. "Help. Please," came a faint reply, this one unmistakably from a male voice. Panic surged in Jake's chest as he shouted again. "Hang on. I'm coming." Each step felt like a battle against the elements, but Jake pressed on. He dodged branches and debris, focusing solely on the sound that was growing clearer with each passing moment. Come on, he muttered, desperation creeping into his movements. He had to find him. Finally, he burst through the last thicket to discover a scene that rocked him to his core. A man was pinned against the ground, a heavy beam across his chest, his face a mask of agony. "Get it off me!" he gasped, sweat mixing with rain. Jake rushed over, taking in the dangerous situation. "Just hold on. We'll get you out." He felt a rush of panic as the man groaned beneath the weight, the storm around them only amplifying the severity of the moment. Just then, Mark appeared beside him, breathless and wild-eyed. "Jake, we can't lift it alone. We need leverage." "Right." They had to work together. Muscles straining, they positioned themselves at either end of the beam. Jake exchanged a quick glance with Mark, they both nodded at the same moment, and with a heave, they attempted to lift it just enough to ease the man's suffering. The weight was crushing, reality screaming at them as thunder crashed overhead. "I can't hold it," Mark said, panic lacing his voice. "What if it falls? Just a little longer." Jake shouted, feeling the intensity magnify as the man gasped beneath them. "Help!" The man's voice turned urgent. "I can't breathe." With that plea echoing in his mind, Jake pushed with every ounce of strength he had left. The rain fell heavier, as if the sky itself was crying for them. In an instant, something snapped within Jake. This was not just about the man pinned, or even the fear of what lay ahead. It was about the ripple effect of their actions. It wasn't just one life they would be fighting for, it was a chain that could reach far beyond this storm. "Ready? 1, 2, 3. They pushed, all the muscles in their bodies straining. The beam shifted, and, with a rush, the man was free. Gasping, Jake fell back, panting in relief, but before he could celebrate, a deeper rumble echoed in the distance. There was another crash, a house coming down. The world seemed to tilt. What was that? Mark breathed, looking over Jake's shoulder, eyes wide. As they prepared to react, the ground quivered beneath them, sending a fresh wave of panic coursing through them both. Mark began, but the skies responded with a fierce roar, drowning out everything else. "Let us go." And while pain and fear clenched at their hearts, they raced toward the sound of destruction, knowing that the storm was only just beginning. Would they find the strength to face whatever awaited them next? The rain lashed against Jake's face as he and Mark took sprinting strides away from the desperately freestanding beam and toward the direction of the latest crash. Every step felt precarious, the ground shifting beneath them, a liquid landscape of chaos and uncertainty. The thunder rolled overhead like an angry beast, a relentless reminder of their precarious situation. "What if it's another house?" Mark shouted, urgency punctuating his voice. "We need to find out." Jake yelled back, adrenaline blocking out the chill of the rain and wind. Each sound, the cracking of branches, the distant cries of others still trapped, urged him forward, fueling a fire he didn't know he had. They dashed past scattered debris, careful not to trip or fall. As they rounded a corner, the silhouettes of what had been a family home emerged from the darkness, its roof caved in and one side crumpled like a tin can. Another crash echoed, this one louder and more menacing, sending shivers down their spines. "Are you sure we should go in there?" Mark hesitated, eyeing the sagging structure. "We can't leave anyone behind." Jake insisted, his voice firm even as doubt flickered in the back of his mind. "We can't." Together, they climbing over what remained of a front porch, splintered wood and shards of glass littering the ground. Then they paused, listening. A weak call broke through the storm, followed by a desperate sob. "Help! Please, someone help me! Over here!" Jake shouted, his heart racing as he led Mark toward the sound. He felt an unyielding urgency pulsing in his veins. This was not just about survival, it was about hope. They pushed through the rubble, finding a way inside the shell of the house. The air was thick with dust and fear. Half-light flickered from a flashlight hastily left on by whoever had been caught inside, illuminating the jagged walls. The cries were louder now, pulling them like a thread through a needle. "Stay close," Mark said, taking Jake's arm. They ventured deeper, carefully navigating fallen beams and shattered furniture. The cries grew frantic, echoing in the small space, creating a haunting melody of despair. As they rounded another corner, near the shattered remnants of what had once been a living room, they found a teenage girl, no older than 17, trapped beneath a collapsed section of the ceiling. Her eyes were wide with fear, tears streamed down her mud-soaked cheeks as she struggled to push the heavy debris off herself. "Hang on. We're here," Jake shouted, rushing to her side. He crouched down to analyze the situation, his mind racing. "Just hold on. You're going to be okay. Please, I can't breathe." She gasped, panic lacing her voice, her frail struggles compelling Jake into action. "Mark, we need to get this off her," he urged, pointing to the ceiling that felt like it could betray them at any second. Together, they maneuvered, pushing and pulling with what felt like their last scraps of strength. The girl cried out as they strained, but it was a sound that spurred them on. They lifted and shifted with all their might, time distorting in the chaos around them. With one tremendous effort, they freed her. She gasped a shaky breath, sitting up and cradling her head in shock. Mark fell back on his heels, panting, while Jake stared at her wide-eyed. "Are you all right?" he managed to ask, voice hoarse. I think so," she murmured, blinking in disbelief. In that moment, a new crash resounded outside. A wall of the house crumbled further, and the ground shook ominously beneath them. The teenage girl squeaked in fear, clutching her knees to her chest. "We need to get out," Mark shouted, scrambling to his feet, eyes darting to the impending collapse of their surroundings. The storm had escalated into an even greater fury, the winds howled and rain screamed against the windows. Jake looked at his friend and the girl, heart pounding. "We can't wait. We'll make it." As they turned to head back the way they came, a flash of lightning illuminated their path, showing jagged edges of wood and tangles of reinforcing metal scattered everywhere, but as Jake led them, he couldn't shake the feeling that more than just the storm was at play. An unsettling thought gnawed at him: what if this was only the start of something much worse? "Let us move," he urged them. They hesitated for just a heartbeat longer, then bolted back into the storm's grip. Beyond the chaos, the true battle awaited. Would they truly find their way through this nightmare, or would they be buried in the wreckage of despair? Jake's heart raced as they stumbled back through the wreckage, darkening shadows flashing before his eyes with each jagged beam illuminated by the sporadic lightning. Mark and the girl, Amelia, followed closely, the only sounds amid the tempest being their hurried breaths and the constant downpour against the remnants of the house around them. "We're almost there," Mark encouraged, his voice strained but steady. He kept glancing back, anxiety lining his features as they darted towards what they hoped was the exit. I can't do this," Amelia gasped, her legs trembling as they pushed deeper into the crumbling structure. "It's too much. Just a little further," Jake called back, forcing himself to look up, blocking out the worrying cracks and creaks of the house's body settling under the storm's onslaught. He felt a surge of determination, a quiet promise that they wouldn't leave her behind. With one last push, they broke free of the wreckage and emerged into the chaos outside. The wind hit them like a wall, rain stinging their faces as they scanned the tumultuous scene. The landscape had morphed into an unrecognizable disaster, houses reduced to splinters and trees uprooted. "Where do we go?" Mark shouted, squinting against the sheets of rain. "Follow me," Jake cried, gripping Amelia's wrist tightly as they navigated through a new maze of destruction. In that moment, they couldn't afford fear. They ducked around a cluster of debris when suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck nearby, blinding them for a split second. When their vision cleared, Jake's stomach dropped. Two figures emerged from the shadows, moving in their direction. "Hey! Over here!" one of the figures yelled, waving frantically. "Are they?" Mark muttered, hesitant but hopeful. "Let us go," Jake urged, propelling forward. They dashed towards the figures, relief washing over them when they recognized two neighbors from down the street, Tom and Lisa. "Jake! Mark! You guys all right?" Tom yelled, panic threading through his tone. "We were trapped in a house, we just got her out." Jake jerked a thumb back at Amelia, who stood there, shaking uncontrollably, overwhelmed by emotion and the chaos of the situation. "You need to come with us," Lisa said, urgency woven into her voice. "There's a shelter close by, we have to get out of here before it gets worse." Hasty steps turned to a sprint as they followed Tom and Lisa, the fear swirling into determination. Each second felt like an eternity, but they pressed on, dodging toppled bricks and squelching mud beneath their feet. Amelia stumbled, nearly falling, but Jake reached out, grabbing her arm just in time. "I've got you," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. With every ounce of energy, he helped her maintain her footing. "Can you run?" Mark called back, glancing over his shoulder. I think so," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Before any more words were exchanged, another deafening crash echoed through the air, a sound so raw and visceral that it sent a chill down Jake's spine. They paused, the sound of the storm engulfing any remaining shreds of doubt and fear. His heart raced as he looked back. A building was collapsing just blocks away, the sight weighing on Alex's mind like a dark cloud. "Move it," Jake urged again, and although his voice held an edge of panic, he felt a flicker of resilience from the group. They surged ahead, dogged by the reality of the disaster engulfing their town. Just as they approached what seemed to be a makeshift shelter, a congregation of neighbors' homes held together by raw community spirit, a scream pierced the air. It was haunting and shattered hope. Jake stopped dead in his tracks, catching a glimpse of a small boy, alone amongst the chaos, crying out for someone to find him. "No," he breathed, feeling an ice-cold weight settle in his chest. "We can't leave him." "What? We can't go back," Mark protested, fear visible on his face. But the echoes of the boy's cries pulled relentlessly at Jake's heart. Each shout seemed to plead with him, a call to arms. "We can't just abandon him," Jake shouted. Back, desperate as they all exchanged urgent glances, Jake realized that this wasn't just a journey for survival anymore. It was a fight against their own fears, their doubts, their limits. A fight for every soul affected by this storm, and as he prepared to charge back into the chaos, a sinking realization loomed. What if he could save one, but in doing so, lose everything? Would he risk it all, knowing the darkness closing in behind them? "Jake, wait," Mark called, but his resolve had already solidified. With his heart pounding in his ears and the storm swirling around him, Jake took a deep breath and stepped forward into hatred of the storm, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Would courage ripple into something hopeful, or bring forth the tempest's wrath? He had to know. Jake dashed back into the storm, the icy rain slapping his face as he sprinted towards the sound of the boy's cries. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to join Mark, Amelia, Tom, and Lisa, to get to safety. But the boy's voice cut through the chaos, pure and anxious. It was a sound that burrowed deep into his chest, igniting a fire of urgency. "Stay close," Jake shouted over his shoulder, trusting Mark would follow despite his earlier protests. He could feel the weight of the world pressing down around him, but he couldn't turn away. Not now. The storm battered against him as he forged ahead, each step a battle against the wind's howling fury. "Where are you?" he yelled, his voice barely rising above the tempest. The cries continued, sharp and desperate, guiding him like a beacon. He emerged into a small clearing amid the wreckage, the darkened sky wreathed in flashes of lightning revealing glimpses of devastation. Then he saw him, a small boy, no older than 6 or 7, standing on a pile of twisted wood and debris, tears streaming down his dirt-smudged cheeks. His frail arms flailed as he called out for his mother. "Hey! I'm here!" Jake yelled, his heart breaking for the child. He rushed closer, slipping on the wet ground but steadying himself against a fallen beam. "It's okay. I'm coming." But the boy flinched at Jake's voice, his eyes wide with fear. "No. Go away!" he cried, backing up nervously, as if the storm were safer than the stranger approaching him. "Please, I just want to help," Jake pleaded, his hands raised in surrender, moving closer but cautious not to scare him away. "What's your name?" "Ethan," he whimpered, glancing around as if expecting someone to rescue him. A surge of panic caught in Jake's throat. There was no time for hesitation. "Ethan. Where's your mom?" "I don't know." The boy's voice broke, echoing the fragility of the moment. She was here." Jake felt the weight of the boy's fear wrap around him. "Listen to me, Ethan," he said firmly, fighting to maintain a calm exterior. "We're going to find her together. You can trust me. Let us get you out of here." Just then, Mark, panting heavily, burst through the debris and skidded to a stop beside Jake. "What are you doing?" "We need to go," he said urgently, glancing back at the approaching darkness. "Mark, this is Ethan. We need to find his mom," Jake replied, keeping his gaze locked on the boy. "You have to help me." Mark hesitated, torn between the desire to protect Jake and the impending storm. "Jake. Please, just help me." Jake pleaded one more time. He could see the conflicted look on Mark's face, but just as he feared a refusal, Mark stepped forward. Okay, Mark relented, slowly crossing the wreckage to kneel beside Ethan. "We'll help you, buddy. But you have to trust us." Ethan nodded slowly, tears glistening on his face, and Jake felt a frantic weight lift just a little. They found him. Now, they needed to find his mother. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the chaos around them and reminding Jake just how vulnerable they were. With every passing moment, the realization settled the storm was not their only fight. Time was slipping away. "Ethan, can you point us in the direction you last saw her?" Jake asked, urgency lacing his tone. The little boy, still trembling, took a tentative step forward and pointed through the wreckage. "Back that way by the blue house, let us go," Mark said, his voice steadier now. The adrenaline surged again as they took off, navigating the ruins with Ethan trailing behind them, close enough to feel safe but still terrified. But as they moved deeper into the chaos, doubts clouded Jake's mind. What if they couldn't find her? What if the storm swallowed them whole before they had the chance to save anyone? The weight of uncertainty gripped him fiercely while the rain poured relentlessly around them. With every heartbeat, he pushed forward, driven not just by courage, but by the raw desperation of those who had no voice, like Ethan. He felt responsible for more than just himself. What if his actions, his choices, had the power to change everything, to not only save a boy but to bring joy back to a family fractured by terror? The storm raged on, fury and despair swirling together, and as they pressed onward, the reality of their mission loomed larger than ever. Would they find Ethan's mother in time, or would fear become the biggest adversary of all? Just as they rounded a corner, a distant sound broke through the thunder, a voice, calling, desperate, echoing through the downpour. Jake exchanged a glance with Mark, and they both realized the truth. They weren't just fighting against nature anymore, they were fighting for hope. Each step was a leap into uncertainty. But was hope strong enough to pierce through the storm? Jake knew he had to find out. Ethan's tiny body trembled as he clutched Jake's sleeve, and the rain cascaded down like a torrent, drowning out every other sound. It was hard to breathe, hard to think. Jake focused on the sound that had pierced through the chaos, a voice, a fierce plea amidst nature's fury. "Do you hear that?" Jake shouted, pointing to a shadowy figure in the distance, half hidden by the storm's rage. "That might be her." "Yes," Ethan cried, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. "That's my mom." Mark took the lead, his long strides cutting through the debris as Jake urged Ethan to keep up. "Stay close, Ethan," Mark called, glancing back with a reassuring nod. They pushed through the wreckage, hearts racing with every step, each heartbeat crescendoing with the growing urgency. The voice grew louder, more desperate. It was a mixture of cries and shouts, cutting through the cacophony of wind and rain like a knife. "Jake! You hear that? It's coming from the other side," Mark urged, pointing toward a heavy wooden door that swung in the wind, barely holding on its hinges. "Mom!" Ethan screamed again, his little voice breaking through the storm. Jake felt a surge of determination. They had fought through this chaos not just for themselves, but for this child who had lost everything in moments. "We're coming. Hang in there," he called out, stopping just short of the door. "Is she in there?" Ethan asked, eyes darting between Jake and the door. "I don't know, buddy," Jake admitted, but he stepped forward, grasping the handle. It was slick and unyielding, resisting him as the storm raged outside. Taking a deep breath, he pulled with all his strength. The door creaked open just wide enough for him to squeeze through. Inside lay a disheveled room, littered with remnants of a life that had been photos scattered, furniture overturned, and shadows lurking in the corners. In the midst of this chaos was a woman, soaked and terrified, her eyes wide as they met Jake's. "Mom!" Ethan shouted again, and Jake stepped aside, letting the boy rush past him into the room. The woman dropped to her knees, arms open wide. "Oh, Ethan," she gasped, enveloping him in a desperate embrace. Her relief washed over her, and for a moment, the world outside faded into nothing. Jake and Mark exchanged glances, both feeling the weight of their shared worry lift slightly. Yet, as the reunion unfolded, the storm continued to rage outside, a reminder that this was over. Mark turned to Jake, tension returning to his shoulders. "What now?" he asked, glancing back at the door as thunder crashed ominously. "Now we get them to safety," Jake said firmly, movement already stirring in his chest. He knew there was no time to waste. "We can't stay here. The roof looks like it could go any second." Ethan's mother dried her tears, but fresh panic washed over her face. "What about the others? My husband? I don't know where he is." The word struck Jake hard. There was still so much uncertainty. They had barely escaped themselves and now they held the weight of a family fractured itself. Turning back toward the door, he felt the storm's howl intensifying as if the universe itself conspired against them. "Ethan, we need to move fast. Hold on to your mom's hand," Jake instructed, urgency flooding his voice. "Mark, stay close to both of them. We'll get through this together." As they stepped outside, droplets stingingly cold, the wind whipped around them like a vengeful spirit. Just then, another rumble broke through something beyond thunder, a crash nearby. Jake's heart raced. "We need to hurry. Follow me." Navigating the rubble, they faced unknown dangers lurking at every turn, but a flicker of hope ignited within him. They would not only save Ethan and his mom but also find her husband. Despite the fear gripping him, this was their fight. "Do you think we'll find him?" Ethan asked, glancing up at Jake with wide, hopeful eyes. "We will. I promise," Jake said, not sure if he believed it himself. Just then, another cry echoed through the tempest, this one familiar yet distant. It called to him, a lingering whisper of fear and need. "Jake! Do you hear that?" Mark shouted, his voice barely rising above the wind. Jake felt the doubt creep back in, but he pushed it away. They had to go towards that sound. It might lead them to more lives they could save. The question burned in his heart, was their mission only beginning, and would there be more lives, more hopes and perhaps more heartbreak waiting just around the next corner? Jake felt the storm tearing at him, each gust of wind shouting in protest as he took step after step through the chaotic debris. Gripping the small hand of Ethan tightly, he felt the pressure of responsibility thrumming in his veins. They had already saved one life, could they save another before the storm swallowed everything whole? The relentless rain hammered against their bodies, creating a drumbeat of urgency. They pressed on, Mark keeping close to Ethan's mother, ensuring they remained connected and safe. Jake squinted through the shadows, searching desperately for any sign of life. The shouts, the cries, they echoed in his mind like a battle hymn, compelling him forward. Ahead, flashes of movement caught his eye. "Come on. This way!" Jake shouted, pulling Ethan closer as he raced toward the source of the calls for help, his heart pounding to a rhythm of hope and fear. Each scream and gasp reminded him that behind every voice could lie another chance to connect, to save. As they neared a section of a fallen house, Jake could make out the figure of a man, trapped beneath the wooden beams. "Yes. Over here!" he called, urgency taking over every fiber of his being. "We need help." He pinned. Mark sprinted forward with Ethan's mom right behind, a newfound urgency in their steps. The man's eyes widened at their approach, relief flickering across his weary face. "Help!" he gasped, and in that instant, Jake recognized the bond that had blossomed among them, all the strength in vulnerability unified by desperation. "Hold on," Jake urged, diving into the debris with Mark right beside him. Together, they pushed and pulled, grunting with effort as they shifted the heavy beam. The weight seemed insurmountable, but they had an army of thoughts driving them to reconnect families, to prove that asking for help wasn't weakness, but strength. "I can't hold this much longer," Mark grunted, sweat pouring down his brow. "Just a bit longer. We're almost there," Jake shouted, using every ounce of his strength. The man beneath them was groaning, pain etched on his face. But as they lent their bodies to the task, Jake felt a rush of connection. With one final heave, they shifted the beam enough for the man to wriggle free. His eyes widened, tears spilling over as he gasped for air. Thank you so much." The silence that followed was heavy and volatile, filled with relief and unspoken burdens. Yet, Jake sensed something deeper stirring within him, a realization that this was just the beginning. They were alive. They were safe. But the storm still howled, and the town screamed for help. "Is everyone accounted for?" Jake asked, feeling hope tremor in the air. "Not yet," the man replied, glancing back toward the ruins of what had once been a family home. "My wife, I can't leave her. We'll find her," Jake replied fervently. The fire in his heart flared, igniting a chorus of strength within. "We need to move quickly," Mark urged, the rain still thrashing against them. As they regrouped, the tiny voice behind him caught Jake's attention. "Can we help them too?" Ethan asked, his innocent hope pulling strong against the uncertainty swirling around them. Jake knelt down, meeting Ethan eye to eye. "We'll do everything we can. Together." With renewed purpose, they pressed on, maneuvering through indomitable nature, hearts united by the awful strain of the storm outside. It was chaos, yes, but through that chaos emerged a threaded tapestry of hope, their shared bravery interwoven with the resilience of a community that refused to be broken. Finally, as they rounded a corner, a woman's frantic cries filled the air, frantic and laced with a mother's panic. "Help! Please, help me! Can you hear that?" Jake shouted to the group, galvanizing them into action. "That way! Let us go!" They dashed toward her voice, each heartbeat drumming with the rhythm of urgency. The aftermath of the storm loomed behind them, but the courage they had ignited within one another surged forward, bursting through what was left. They found her disoriented, clutching a broken chair as she tried to keep a small toddler safe from the chaos. "Mommy!" Ethan screamed, rushing toward her as if guided by an invisible thread. "Ethan!" She scooped him into her arms, tears flowing freely. Jake stood back, watching the reunion unfold, his heart swelling with a sense of fulfillment deeper than he had ever expected. This was their true victory, not just in saving lives, but in connecting them again, weaving them back into the fabric of something unbreakable. Through shared struggles, laughter, bravery, and vulnerability, they found healing together. As they slipped back through the storm, closer as a community, everything shifted for Jake. He inhaled deeply, realizing pride had held him back for far too long. In letting others in, he discovered a realm of love and support where burdens get lighter when shared. With every heartbeat, he embraced the profound beauty of connection, hope blossoming through adversity. And still, through the whirlpool of destruction, another battle lay ahead. But this time, Jake felt invincible, armed not with walls of pride, but with an open heart ready to receive and give. Together, they stepped out into the tempest, fully aware of the power of compassion intertwined with hope, prepared to face whatever came next. As a community, they would rise, stronger and more united than ever. You need to subscribe now. Tap that button and don't miss out on these exclusive stories that inspire real change and hope. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Let us show that we're a community that cares. Comment below and share your feelings about this transformation. We want to hear your thoughts and experiences, and don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this. This is the moment to show your support. It can change someone else's life. Let us spread hope together.